So welcome everyone who's here. Happy International Women's Day, first up, and fantastic to see the number of women's names who are coming up on the participation list. So go us, basically. We're going to be talking today to the fantastic Jemma from Lloyds Banking Group. And we're going to be looking at the really serious issue of why digital poverty has an even more disproportionate impact on women. Digital poverty itself, we already understand why that is such an important issue. We need it. We need access to the internet in this society for education, for employability skills, even just to access sort of basic services, healthcare, banking particularly, of course, is relevant to Jemma, but so much else. And basically through the pandemic, a light has really been shone on why that's so important, and people have started to realise that there is this gap. But as mentioned, there's even more women than men who are impacted on this, and we see this even at household level. Oh no, that's something my husband does, I don't get online, that kind of thing. So it really is a very important issue, and that's why we're really keen to focus in on that today, on Break the Bias theme of IWD. So I'm Elizabeth Anderson, I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the Digital Poverty Alliance, and we are about ending digital poverty by 2030. That is our core mission. Jemma, could you give a brief introduction to yourself?
Absolutely, yeah, and thank you for having me here today. As you say, International Women's Day, always a great opportunity and a great excuse to connect with people and to also just share a bit of what's going on. What are some of the challenges? What are we facing, and how can we work together? So I work at Lloyds Banking Group. So Lloyds Banking Group is the UK's biggest digital bank. We've got a number of different brands that you will have heard of. Obviously, the obvious one being Lloyds Bank, but Bank of Scotland, Scottish Widows, Halifax, and many others. And I guess within our technology and transformation division, I have the privilege actually of looking after our sustainability agenda, particularly focusing on inclusion. And when I talk about inclusion, absolutely digital inclusion and the opportunity for technology and digital to create equitable experiences and opportunities for all is a really key part of that, as well as also thinking about financial well-being, capability, and other different elements that you would expect a financial services organisation to be thinking about. Over the last kind of 5-6 years, we've spent quite a bit of time and focus really prioritising, trying to understand and get under the skin of the digital exclusion issue and challenge across the UK. The reason being that obviously, banking, like many industries, has seen real transformation and disruption over the last kind of 10 years in particular. But for us, with a core mission of thinking about and focusing on helping Britain prosper, it's how do we make sure that as that transformation happens, we don't leave anyone behind. And I guess a part of our role is thinking about the footprint of organisations, that we've got with our branches, but also our colleagues in all corners of the UK, and how do we make sure that we're supporting those communities. But actually, it's really fundamentally now too about inclusive design. How do we make sure that as we are building, developing, deploying technology, but also as we're evolving our digital channel from a banking perspective, we're making sure that we're making it as accessible as possible and creating opportunities to support people with getting hold of that core service. So broad brush.
Brilliant. I think I possibly just paused there for a second, so I sort of slightly missed the end of that, Jemma, but that's real life digital technology for you. So you've talked a little bit there sort of about why this agenda is so important to Lloyds Bank. It would be really great just to sort of open up, why do you personally feel so strongly about digital exclusion and digital poverty? You sort of mentioned it's a privilege leading the sustainability work for Lloyds Banking Group, but it'd be great to hear a bit more about your personal motivation.
Yeah, definitely. I think my personal motivation is for a number of different reasons. Growing up, I lived in lots of different parts of the UK. I come from a military family and I lived in lots of different places abroad. And I guess even from probably kind of secondary school age onwards, the fact that we were living in different countries and different parts of the country, technology, digital was such a key part of the way in which, we kept in contact with family, kept up to date with schooling, even when we lived in, some quite remote places. but also just the way in which it kind of supported the people that we kind of knew in the communities that we were part of as well. So living in northeastern Canada, so I lived in Labrador for kind of 4 years, and actually looking at all of the different ways in which our kind of international community was able to keep in touch. It was just such a key part of what it is that we learnt at school and the way that we kind of deployed it. But I think in more recent times, over the last few years, it's just, if I think about the work that we're doing to try and support communities across the UK, whether we're talking about helping them to face into the energy crisis, when we talk about looking at financial well-being, accessing finance, accessing banking, getting hold of information, getting the skills they want and the jobs and the opportunities that they're looking to, that is just so much more difficult if you don't have not just digital access, but the skills, the confidence, the capability to really use it, engage with it. And also, if service providers like us aren't providing the opportunity to support you, coach you on that journey, but also providing accessible services, it just means you're at such a disadvantage. So I think, yeah, in my kind of more recent career, just seeing how much benefit there is for people overcoming those challenges, there's nothing more motivating than knowing that the work that you do leads to people being able to lead better lives. So it continues to inspire me and the team every day.
And that's absolutely wonderful that you can see from the experiences that you had within your life the sort of real benefit that the work you're doing now is able to have on individuals, communities, families, or groups of people. And I think that's sort of a lot of what strikes us at the DPA is there isn't one audience that needs support to tackle digital exclusion. It affects all walks of life, all different kinds of people, all different demographics, and in very, very different ways. And how can you understand what you're missing out on if you've never had the opportunity to see what the internet, what digital can do for you? So sort of moving on to our core business today, your business digital index research found that women are less likely to engage with digital technology than men in business. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and whether you feel that this extends to life outside work as well?
So I think definitely what can't be called into question is that women are disproportionately affected by the digital divide and the challenge. We know that more than half the women across the broader globe are not able to access the internet. But I think digital in a way is kind of it's an exacerbator, I suppose, of existing prejudices and challenges. And I think, it's definitely something that we see in our day-to-day work. But interestingly, within the business digital index and the look at kind of small business, female entrepreneurs, small business owners that are female, actually, it isn't necessarily true. We've actually found that this year in our most recent report for the first time that actually 83% of women have high digital capability compared to 81% of men. So it's really kind of, we're on this even playing field, which is obviously fantastic. But I think to my point around digital exacerbating other things that are true, actually where we see the discrepancy is in levels of confidence. So, whether if we think about kind of asking for investment and engaging with venture capitalists, some of those, kind of broader terms, women generally are less likely to feel confident in doing that. It's the classic adage, I think, around a woman typically will need to be able to do 80 or 90% of a job advert to apply for it, versus maybe a man would feel more confident, not quite having 100%, 90%, 80% of it kind of under wraps. I guess that's more what we're seeing in our latest research, is that they might have the level of capability, but confidence means that they're potentially less likely to invest in new technologies. They're definitely less likely to decide to test and learn some of those newer kind of digital products and services. But actually, it is confidence that really kind of underpins that.
And I mean, how do you feel that we can best address that? Because it's that sits between skills and capability and motivation. You've got to have a reason to step outside your comfort zone and do something a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, to be honest, that's why things like International Women's Day is so important, because I think it's about people who have been on that journey and potentially are more confident, have got that experience, lifting other people up, extending that knowledge, that wisdom, those hints and tips, and also, yeah, just open sourcing and sharing as well. What are some of the challenges they faced? I think sometimes, and I think in the past, there's been this real culture of role models being, you know, almost kind of the Stepford wives, the perfect shining examples of how to get everything right. And I think what's been really refreshing, and I think what COVID has taught us all to do, is really reflect on and share what hasn't gone well as well. What difficulties are we facing? How are we really feeling about things? Our anxiety, challenges with mental health, all of those things, you know, don't mean that you're not as good of a leader. It doesn't mean that you're not as good of an entrepreneur or kind of capable of running a business. So how do we make sure that we demonstrate and really showcase some of those stories as well? Because it's really empowering.
Definitely. And I think what you were saying about it exacerbating other problems is really, really important, particularly if you think about women in some of the most difficult situations like domestic violence and abuse. How do you access support if you don't have that online network and the ability to just sort of go online, share your story, see what other people have done, even though you see lots of websites with a kind of, you know, hide me now kind of button, which, you know, it's got its own problems leaving that footprint. At least, you know, there's information out there, but if you can't access that, how do you deal with those kinds of situations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's on all of us as well to make sure that we are considering, you know, even if you think about the very nature of a Zoom call, for example, people with their camera off, people that are less confident kind of chipping in, speaking in, elbows out in a conversation, sometimes their voices and perspectives just aren't heard. So I think, again, for people that are more confident, are more digitally capable, but also more comfortable with the broader kind of situation, to make sure that we're thinking about creating equitable digital experiences as well, to really get the most out of people and give them the opportunities and the confidence that they can then use to kind of build their technology journey and their business outcomes, is just so, yeah, it's so important.
Absolutely. I can see our first question on Q&A has come in. I'm going to come into these shortly, but if you've got any questions for Gemma, do use that Q&A button, which is down at the bottom of the screen, and put your question in there and we'll come to as many as we can. Sort of starting to tie into some of what you were just talking about, Gemma, we sort of feel at the DPA that one of the bigger barriers is motivation. People don't necessarily think the internet is relevant to them. And actually that even kind of goes on in different ways. Even if people have access to the internet, there's lots of tools and lots of different opportunities that maybe people don't take advantage of because they don't understand it, because they're not, you know, they don't see how that links into their lives. How can you imagine what you're missing out on? Do you feel like this is a factor that comes into play in the research and different indices that Lloyds Banking Group produce?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think as well, sometimes we, you know, I think motivation is definitely a barrier to getting online in the first instance. It still represents, you know, the main reason why 50% of people that are offline are saying that they're not going to be online. They just don't see the point. They don't understand the value that it holds from them. But I think increasingly, and I think where our research is kind of pivoting to, is also looking at, but when they're on that digital capability, what prevents them from really getting to exploring new things, challenging new things, connecting with new people. Confidence, as I said, is definitely a big part of it, but absolutely, you're right. I think motivation is too. I think understanding and being able to connect the amount of time that needs to go into, you know, putting yourself out there and engaging with some of these different things, potential cost. I mean, clearly we know that there's a lot of brilliant free activities, platform services kind of on the internet, but nonetheless, it is a cost in time and money often. And we really need to get better at, you know, I think organisation service providers holistically really being clear on what that value proposition is, and making sure that it isn't a generic value proposition. What is that hook for that individual? What is that thing that that person is really motivated by? Because I think sometimes in the past we've made assumptions that actually, oh, means you can do things on the go. Well, actually, if they don't want to do things on the go, that's not particularly interesting. Or actually, if if it's about saving time kind of connecting with customers, actually for a lot of business owners, that's the reason why they do it. They're in a service industry, or they're in a hospitality, whatever it might be. So I think it's about really taking the time to understand what that individual hook is, and also recognizing that all of these things are not one size fits all. So not every digital platform or solution is going to be the right thing for an organization, and that's okay. But I think what we need to do is make sure that we are helping organizations and ourselves being really clear on what are the benefits of the things that we own, and that almost being kind of separate to the benefits of it overall. We as a team are really focused on how do we make sure that people recognize the benefits of online banking. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to bank with us, although obviously that would be rather lovely. It's more about making sure that people beyond our customer base have the access to the support that we provide through our Lloyds Bank Academy, our Bank Scotland Academy, and all of our broader kind of community-led programs and initiatives with partners too.
And that is really important. We've been sort of starting to think a lot about, we talk about digital skills, we talk about, the need to give people the tools that they need. But how do you make that relevant? Very few people are going to want to just go on some random training if they've never been interested in the internet before. Why are you going to go on training to teach you how to use the internet? No, you're going to go on training to teach you how to access your finances, how to report issues with your housing, how to find new interesting recipes, or whatever hobbies and different interests you might have. So it's that kind of hook, and not just it's an overarching enabler, not a sort of topic in itself for most people. Yeah,
absolutely, definitely.
I mean, we're working with a wide group of organisations and companies at the DPA to try and tackle digital poverty. As I said, our mission is to see digital poverty ended by 2030, which is an ambitious target, but one that's really very much needed. If there was one thing that you feel would be the most beneficial to sort of closing that gender gap specifically, what would that be? Or do you feel like that gender gap is actually already starting to really narrow to nothingness?
So I think for me, what we need to be really clear on, I think, is that ultimately equity benefits everyone. So when we talk about creating more equitable experiences, when we talk about women being more empowered to lead in the workforce, to take a step back from the traditional domestic duties, all of those different things, actually what we're also doing is empowering men who may feel like they have to be in traditional kind of 1950s male roles. We're allowing them and empowering them to be more emotional, to not feel like they have to be the breadwinner. It kind of enables everyone to have the opportunity of choice, which I think is fundamentally what we're all striving for, aren't we, really? How can everyone create and control their own destiny? And I think making sure that people have support with understanding opportunities, with understanding outcomes, benefits, capability building, toolkits, confidence, support, mentoring, all of this stuff, it can only benefit everyone. So it's in everyone's interest to do it. I know that's not quite the silver bullet you were maybe looking for there, but that's my feeling. We need to make sure that everyone recognises that equity is a value to everyone. That's exactly the point.
Absolutely, and I think that's so important, actually. Just that value to everybody in society is absolutely crucial. And of course, Lloyds have the Academy to precisely help people who aren't necessarily feeling as confident, but have some interest, gain some more skills. Could you tell us a little bit about how that works and what that does?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess our Academy it's a place, but it's also not a place. So the ethos of the Academy really is that wherever you need help, you can get it. So we have a helpline, if that's your kind of channel of choice, through which we donate and provide devices, and also working with brilliant partners like Vodafone, give away free data and kind of telephone SIMs as well. We also have the on-demand learning and the kind of, whether you want to hear directly from an expert in a masterclass, or whether you want to engage with kind of short bites of training, or whether it's something that's a little bit more comprehensive. There's a range of stuff that's there too. And really important to us is that we're not duplicating. So we have lots of brilliant partners also hosting activities and kind of interactive things there. But we also do run e-learning, kind of interactive webinars, and we're also obviously, as you'd expect us to be, returning to face-to-face support out in communities as well. So we're really trying to make sure that we can kind of convene people, work in communities to deliver change. And absolutely, digital is the, digital skills, digital inclusion is the target, but we're talking about a whole range of outcomes and working with energy providers, financial, other financial institutions. Definitely, for us, we're really fortunate that we're kind of targeted on the outcomes and making sure that as many people as possible have the skills and kind of support and access that they need. So yeah, I think we're trying to create something that is available to everyone, not just our customer base. It's embedded in our customer journey. So if you are one of our customers, you'll see kind of nudges and kind of hints and tips about how to kind of do things differently and think about things more broadly, but absolutely not limited to our customer base. So if anyone on the call is interested in any collaboration, very happy to. And if there's things that you think that we could be playing more of a role in, I'd love to hear it.
And it's absolutely wonderful, Jemma, to sort of see a company like Lloyds taking that kind of social responsibility so seriously. I think we all know there are companies out there who talk a lot about social responsibility and don't necessarily do much, and Lloyds are absolutely sort of living it through everything you do. So that is really, really good to see as a sort of charity leader, to see corporates actually doing that. So we've got a question from Jen, who says, on your point, Jemma, about sharing what we're not so confident in, as two senior women leaders, what message would you give women who are less confident in the digital world?
It's a good question. So I think with anything, sometimes it takes a different perspective to help you realise what you're good at or what you're able to do. So this might sound really obvious, but I think kind of firstly taking the time and kind of reflection to think about what it is that you're not confident in, that in itself is a really good step. But then to think about someone that maybe it's a friend, a family member, or maybe it's someone at work who you perceive to be confident in that thing, and spending a bit of time with them, understanding, chances are they will think that they're not very good at it and that they're not very confident either. But I think sometimes almost kind of using someone else's perspective of the things that you do to help you recognize that you're good at them is really helpful. And I think it's why kind of peer-to-peer mentoring, time together, I love working with some of our partners because they give that healthy challenge, but also because they say, actually, that's a really good thing that you're doing and that's a really good job. And it helps you kind of grow, develop, and really think about reflection. So I think that's probably one thing I'd say.
Yeah, and I think I'd echo that, but I'd also say it is about helping other people realise where they're really good. I worked in an organisation once where there was a woman who was really not confident with her IT. And one of the other staff members, it was a very small organisation, constantly reinforced that to her with the sort of message, it's always you. Oh, yes, you always break things. And I kind of saw this and I went, no, because that's really dragging down. So actually, whether you see that happening or not, everyone can use that kind of little boost of, oh my gosh, you're really good at doing this. Oh, wow, you're the only person who knows actually how that database works. All of those kinds of things, just to remind people that actually they are good, they do know what they're doing, and there's more for everyone to learn. I feel fairly confident on digital technology, but there's always new programs, new processes, things I don't know how to do. And absolutely, as Jemma says, sort of reaching out to people who do know, and never feel with digital or tech or the internet or anything else like there's something silly, like you should know this. Very much like Zoom, everyone assumes now that everyone knows how Zoom works. No, actually that's not the case. You might have been using a different platform, you might have never needed a video conference before. It's, let's take away some of that stigma of assumption.
And I think you make such a, sorry, I was just going to say, I think you make such a good point as well on, actually it's okay not to be good at something too. But what we need to do is reward and recognise and support people that are putting their hand up to say, I don't feel like I'm an expert at this, but I'm giving it a go. I'm trying and I'm learning. I think the more that we can be really open and celebratory about giving people the permission to do things differently, that can only ever help as well, can't it?
Absolutely. Karen has asked, how are Lloyds addressing the new responsibility in the digital era, so corporate digital responsibility? So moving beyond CSR to consider societal, economic and ecological impact of the data and digital used within and by Lloyds, sort of including ESG, SDG, around investment, so sustainable development goals.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think like every organisation at the moment, there is a big lens of introspection as to, are we doing enough and could we be doing more? I think across COVID, we pivoted a lot of our kind of services and activities quite quickly, but also really took a step back to go, where does it make sense for us to play a role versus where do we need to just support community organisations who are doing brilliant jobs? How do we just empower them and support them and connect our staff in to volunteer with some of those companies too? So I think we're now at a different point where actually, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're kind of through the worst of the COVID crisis, as people are out and about and as the regional economies are thinking about what they do next and what that looks like, the world of work is changing, absolutely reflecting on the things that we could do differently to make a difference. Clearly, we're absolutely not perfect and there's always more that we could and should be doing. But a few weeks ago, we launched our kind of reiterated purpose strategy, which is around helping Britain prosper. It's some pretty lofty goals around net zero commitments and also how we can support broader society. But I think what's really exciting is while we've made these big commitments, it's now that the hard work is underway as across the organisation, we're all working together to design the right kind of roadmap. What are the big things that we're going to do? How are we going to do them in a sustainable and affecting way? How are we going to step back from, some of the big PRE numbers to look at systemic change, and how do we engage the right organisations that can tell us what we're doing wrong as well as what it is that we're doing right? So yeah, it feels like an exciting time, but there definitely isn't kind of 6 or 7 initiatives that I'm going to rattle off. It is about working towards that sustainable and inclusive change, reconsidering that holistic approach. We need to be through our product services as well as through our community initiatives and the partnerships that we hold as well.
Brilliant. And another question here, are there things that you think we could be doing for people who are at the sharpest end of this? So, for example, people who are experiencing homelessness, so rough sleepers. Tough one, I know, it says.
It is a tough one. And I think, as we talked about at the top of the call, really, digital just exacerbates some of the challenges. So we know through working with organisations like Shelter and other community organisations in different regions that often, like for many people, a mobile is a lifeline. It's a way to kind of find couch surfing opportunities. It's a way to connect with local services. It's a way to kind of keep that sense of ownership. So that's why we're spending a lot of time looking at how do we continue to donate devices, how do we work with partners that can really help support people when they need it most. And also just being really cognizant of where is the best way for an organisation like ours to make an impact. Sometimes it is far better to engage and support community organisations and give them the support they need, rather than try to face that challenge and tackle it ourselves as well.
Fantastic. And Paul, who's our CEO, is here and listening today, which is great. And he says that he knows that there are groups specifically supporting women working in tech and looking to encourage more women and girls to get involved in a tech career. Do you work alongside those groups?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're really delighted to work with people like the Tech Talent Charter. We've done a bit of work with STEMettes as well in the past. I think, as I was saying at the start, I think recognising where you as an organisation can play a role, but where is it so important to learn from and work with smaller organisations that are really at the sharp end of specific challenges. I mean, ultimately, that's why the Digital Poverty Alliance is brilliant, right? Because it's taking a specific focus on a really key societal issue and really building that expertise, building that coalition of activity against it. So, yeah, I think like I said as well, though, if there's any organisations we should be working with or speaking to, I'd love to know, definitely.
Okay, and Karen has just popped back on with a follow-up question. So, how how do Lloyds explore ethics by design? So looking at the origins of data prior to developing new digital technologies, as she feels this is where most of the bias to potentially exclude women comes from. And then she references Ivana Bartoletti in how to rectify that.
Firstly, couldn't agree more. This is part of why so many organisations like ours are so focused on getting and building and growing and nurturing diverse talent, to make sure that we've got different perspectives and that we're building things and deploying things that represent the people that we're trying to support and design services for ultimately. So firstly, it's a massive challenge for every organisation out there at the moment, because there hasn't been, as we all know, enough support in the education system and beyond for growing, developing and nurturing female and more broader, diverse career pathways, particularly in technology. So yeah, it's definitely something that's front of mind. A big piece of our work at the moment in the team is looking at inclusive design, and I guess recognising that designers and people of a design discipline are absolutely front and centre and key to that kind of momentum. But actually, so are our product owners, our engineers, our developers, our scrum masters, our leaders. Everyone can have, has the opportunity to make micro decisions every day that can lead to really tangible impact for customers. So it isn't the perspective or the ownership of one specific team. Everyone in our organisation needs to get the implications of the decisions that they take every day, and we need to make sure that they're the right kind of activities and safeguards and guide rails in place to make sure that it meets the expectations that we're trying to create. So yes, it's definitely a really big focus of work, and if I'm honest, some of our most challenging in an organisation of our size, but absolutely the most rewarding, because the hope is to make sure that the stuff that we're doing on our service and product design meets our community initiatives and it all comes up. So the hope, we just can't do it alone. So as I said, this is a continuous shameless plea for partners to get in touch if you've got ideas about what we could and should be doing differently.
Absolutely, and I can see that Laura Phillips from Digital Communities Wales has dropped some messages in the chat, so I think she would love to get in touch with you, Gemma. And absolutely, I think it's so important. It's that quote about how we've always done things this way is the greatest enemy of making any change, and it's always about thinking about new ideas, new ways of doing things, challenging received wisdom, and just kind of being able to think about how different people have different needs, and that all links together. We've lost Gemma's picture. Hopefully we haven't lost Gemma.
No, apologies. The signal is a little bit dodgy, unfortunately, so apologies. I thought I'd turn my camera off to make sure I can still hear you, but thank you.
Fine. I think we've got time for just one more question. So that is from an anonymous attendee. It's a great point on unconscious bias, even in design stages. Are there any particular training exercises or partners that you work with on this?
Oh, great question. So, I mean, God, the list of organisations that we learn from is endless, to be honest with you. There's a brilliant design agency called Snook who do some fantastic work that I'd recognise. They have loads of Medium blogs that are just incredible, and we've done some work with them as in the last kind of few years as well. Microsoft, the principles of inclusive design and how they deploy that across their organisations, really interesting and great to kind of learn from and consider. I mean, ultimately, organisations like Bernardo's, there's just so many charities that are doing brilliant work in this space and really leading from the front on it. So what I might do is have a little reflect and come up with a little list of people who are doing brilliant things and share it, if that's helpful.
That'd be really lovely, Gemma. Thank you so much. Well, just enough time to wrap up. Thank you everyone who came along. Sorry that we did need to start a little bit late. Always diary challenges, especially on a busy day like International Women's Day. Do continue this conversation in the DPA Community Hub, and I believe my colleague Fiona from the DPA will post that link in the chat just for anyone who isn't familiar with the hub. It is a fantastic space where you can discuss questions, you can come up with ideas, you can ask for help, all sorts of things on there, and lots of really, really helpful people. But most of all, huge thanks to Gemma for making space in her day today to talk to us about the work that she's doing.
No, not at all. It was brilliant. Thank you all for your passion and enthusiasm on this topic. It's so important.